Welcome to the Caffeine Stream on Caffeine and Philosophy.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Caffeine Stream, the podcast of Caffeine and Philosophy. I'm your host, C.B. Robertson. You can call me Chris. And apologies for the delay in releasing this. I had a family get-together to attend over the weekend. Had to prepare for all that, but so I haven't really gotten around to doing as much research into the transhumanism stuff as I would like to. So that's being put on hold for a moment, but I've got some other stuff that I think is relevant to a lot of conversations and discussions going on online today as they pertain to the body. And the first one I wanted to address, and this is something I've covered in the past, but it's always fun to revisit these things because you learn more as time progresses from your first, commentary on a subject. And that's the subject of post-physique. It's a phenomena that emerged in I want to say the mid-2010s, really, but it really took off later on, 2018, 2019. And so I wanted to start by, I suppose first I'll lay out sort of where I want to go with this podcast. There are two main arguments for post-physique as the phenomenon, which I'll explain in a second, and two arguments against. The arguments for are the ethos argument, which is what I made in the blog post I wrote a couple years back. But secondly, and maybe more importantly, there's the aesthetic commons argument. And then the arguments against this thing are vanity, the concern about vanity, and so a problem with yourself, and then the argument about shaming, so the concern about others. So post-physique, let me begin by reading this sort of this comic that I opened my blog post with. It's from someone on Twitter, I assume, who goes by Existential Comics, and he said, "There are legit a lot of dudes on this website who won't take anyone's political opinion seriously if they don't lift. Not if they don't read, not if they don't do activism or organize, if they don't lift weights to get huge." End quote. And this is, put out there as this sort of sarcastic comment, like, can you believe what these people are doing? And all the post-physique bros are like, yes, this is exactly what we believe, unironically. And it's the idea with post-physique, which I suppose I should explain now, is that your opinions on the world, on policy, on politics, on culture, are irrelevant if you don't work out and demonstrate that you work out. So post pictures of yourself and your gains and the muscles that you've acquired through working out. This seems like a very lowbrow Neanderthal take on the world at first glance. I can imagine half of Reddit screeching in incomprehension, the idea. But let me just start by reading the blog post and the Ethos article, or argument here. So, I wrote this in February of 2020. I noticed back in 2017 that ethos had been lacking in modern political dialogue. And here I have another quote from a speech from even older. Quote, Aristotle held that there were three aspects of rhetoric. Ethos, what is usually translated as personal qualification, pathos, that's which stirs people's emotions, and logos, what we might think of as oral demonstration of truth. Let me begin with ethos. Ethos is usually translated as the qualifications that make you someone worth listening to, but it is far more than mere credentials. Aristotle said of ethos, quote, persuasion is achieved by the speaker's personal character when the speech is so spoken as to make us think him credible, end quote. Apologies for the quote within a quote within a quote here. In other words, ethos is about more than just the individual. In fact, as it's used today, ethos is really best thought of as the characteristic spirit of a group. You may hear of the ethos of doctors derived from the Hippocratic Oath, or of the ethos of the U.S. Marines. It's not a coincidence that our word ethics comes from ethos. You can't have a systematic framework for judging right action without a group with shared goals and values. When Aristotle talks about ethos, he's talking about the speaker's demonstration that he holds and adheres to the values and characteristic spirit of the audience. He is demonstrating that he's on their side and can be trusted because they share a common identity, if not a common interest. That's what makes him qualified and trustworthy. That's what makes him persuasive. And that's the end of the excerpt from that 2017 speech. So continuing with the blog post. Today's problem is that in a globalized world where everyone is presumed to be equal and valuable, there is no basis for discriminating between who is and is not worth listening to. Everyone understands that many people, perhaps most people, perhaps even almost all people, are not trustworthy enough to listen to. Our goals and values shape and filter our entire lives and our perception of the world. If someone else's goals and values are different than ours, then what they say might not be helpful to us, even if it is factually true. In fact, their words may actually harm us, leading us down another path away from our true aims and closer to theirs. We can try to create ad hoc ideological standards, but the problem with this is that it is very easy for anyone to simply say the right thing, thus either gaining listeners' trust in a predatory fashion or else eroding our trust in others' speech generally. And here, there's this great speech from American Psycho where Patrick Bateman, Christian Bale's character, does such a good job of psychopathically hitting all of the right moral notes in such an ironical fashion. His speeches, they're in this bar or lounge area, and they're all talking about the world problems, and Patrick tells his friend, come on, Bryce, there are a lot more important problems than Sri Lanka to worry about. Like what? Well, we have to end apartheid for one, and slow down the nuclear arms race, stop terrorism and world hunger. We have to provide food and shelter for the homeless and oppose racial discrimination and promote civil rights while also promoting equal rights for women. We have to encourage a return to traditional moral values. Most importantly, we have to promote general social concern and less materialism in young people. Absolutely beautiful. Could have come from Trudeau himself. The chuckle that Bateman gives at the end of that shows how easy it is for manipulative people to mouth all of the to mouth all of the platitudes, to mouth all the right moral language without any investment at all. However, it is much less common and more difficult to live deceptively. Enter the phenomenon of post-physique. Now, at the time I wrote this blog post, I believed that Marcus Fallen, the golden one, created this concept. He corrected me. He reposted this blog post that said, I did not create this, I just am passing this on. So he's one of the great popularizers of this trend, though. And so the idea is, if you don't post pictures of your physique, no one has to listen to your opinion. To the modern Redditing, New York Times reading, NPR listening political participant, this little litmus test sounds not only strange, but like a total non sequitur. What on earth does one's physique have to do with political beliefs and opinions? Why would my fitness determine whether or not what I say is correct? Obviously, there is no direct connection. But as I said before, the factual correctness of a claim doesn't necessarily make a claim useful or helpful. In fact, true facts, and scare quotes there, can be used to manipulate and deceive just as easily as falsehoods, perhaps even more effectively. What is truly necessary for trust and for effective rhetoric is a demonstration of shared values and goals, ethos. Such a demonstration forms a foundation from which truths are trusted, and the occasional falsehood is treated as an honest mistake and not a manipulative or malicious deception. It has this effect because this demonstration of shared values and goals puts the speaker's skin in the listener's game. The speaker and listener are in this together. And if the speaker is wrong, he shares some of the costs. Ironically, Nassim Taleb's excellent book, Skin in the Game, describes the speaker without ethos in physical terms, as an intellectual yet idiot. Quote, "He doesn't know that there is no difference between pseudo-intellectual and intellectual in absence of skin in the game. But a much easier marker, he doesn't even deadlift." End quote. So, understood as a rhetorical technique, post-physique does three things. First, it establishes physical fitness as a positive and high value. Second, it discriminates between those who are actively, consistently, and effectively pursuing fitness and those who are not. Third, it emphasizes the importance of individual pursuit of positive values. The overall effect is that post-physique excludes people from the conversation who don't share your values, assuming your fitness and health and strength are one of your values, freeing up valuable mental space and, paradoxically, permitting you to trust more wholeheartedly. Naturally, physique is not the only positive value one should hold. In all reality, it's probably not even in the top 2 or 3. Religion, family, work, and health, which is not the same as fitness, usually rank slightly higher, perhaps along with values like freedom, honor, mastery, and so forth. But whereas the details of these other values may vary from individual to individual, my God may not be your God, my family almost certainly is not your family, and my dedication to these may therefore appear differently, valuing masculine strength appears universal to virtually all men in all societies. This makes it a useful point to focus on in the metapolitical contest within which people like Marcus Fallen attempt to alter the culture, given the global and democratic current state of things. And so I concluded that post with a posting physique. It's the natural thing to do. And it was at the time I had been doing a lot of ring work in my basement, so I'd done pretty well for myself. But I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm certainly no strongman. I think my deadlift PR is 365, which is pretty strong for a normal person. It's nothing. 365 deadlift is nothing for anyone who's been in the gym for any serious length of time. But nevertheless, I think my body shows my investment in that value. But the important takeaway is the idea that you can apply this ethos principle to other values as well. It's not limited to strength. It's not limited to the body. You can apply it to, you want to look at the garden of the person that you're considering buying gardening courses from, maybe. Things like that. So that's the first argument. That's the ethos argument for post-physique, and along with that, posting physique, the obligation to post-physique, should you choose to accept it, is fantastic motivation to stay fit. There's a whole population, a whole nation, a whole world of people out there who want to get in shape, but are having a hard time with accountability. They don't have anyone in their friend group who is willing to work out with them. They have no one who they're aspiring to be more like, no one to look up to, and so they just sort of naturally default to their ordinary habits. Every once in a while they'll go to the gym and then they'll feel great and then they'll fall off the wagon again. Posting physique as a kind of regular habit keeps you on that train if you want to be the sort of person who looks, feels, and performs better. So okay, that's sort of a part B of the ethos argument, I suppose. The aesthetic commons argument is a little bit different. And here I'm not reading from a blog post here, so this will be a little more ad-libbed, a little more freeform. Apologies for that. But the idea, this really I owe to Kurt Doolittle for expanding the concept of commons by way of expanding the concept of property. What is property? Well, property it normally understood is something that you've mixed your labor with raw materials, and that establishes some ownership of it. The propertarian concept of property, and maybe I'll have to bring either Kurt or Eli or one of those guys on to talk at some point about propertarianism, because that's a fascinating subject in its own right. But the propertarian concept of property is much more simple. It's property is that which people are willing to fight over and fight to defend. And what that does, the utility of that definition, is it includes as property non-material things like language, things like beauty, things like the architecture of a city. This is a commons that must be defended. It can be defended if people have the will and the language to talk about it as a property, from intentional uglification, which occasionally comes to large urban cities. And so when you walk around, so that's the idea of property. What is a commons? A commons in economic language, a commons is some collectively owned property. So most people think of like a park. Usually this is talked about in terms of the oceans, because no one owns the ocean, so everyone kind of owns the ocean, because fishermen come out and take from the ocean for free, essentially. They come out, collect fish. This makes the ocean a common. So what happens if you overfish? Commons are usually talked about in terms of the tragedy of the commons, which is that the nature of commons rewards freeloaders, people who don't restrict themselves, who just take everything they possibly can and leave nothing for everyone else. In the context of a city park, for example, freeloaders would be vagrants, perhaps, or drug users who ruin the experience of the park for everyone else while taking what is offered. Whereas a good user of the park would be someone who comes in and uses the park and enjoys it, but is also respectful of it. They throw their trash away. They don't vandalize. They take care of the park. Perhaps they pay taxes, which support the continuation of the park, or they pay for money to some organization that does that. So maintaining commons, which exist in our society, not just materially, but also beyond the purely material realm. And these commons dictate our experience of moving around in the world outside of our property. And so the second argument for post-physique is that there is an aesthetic commons made up of the other humans that occupy your society. And there is and you can experience this. You can experience this in person. And all you need to do is take a day, start your morning off by going to a bouldering gym or a rock climbing gym somewhere. After you leave that rock climbing gym and see all the 100% rate of beautiful people there, you can go and visit a Walmart or a similar kind of store of that nature. And the experience of being around those two different kinds of people is dramatically different. Being surrounded by beautiful people is a positive experience, and being surrounded by ugly and unhealthy people is a negative experience. It contributes to this aesthetic commons, and ugly people who are surrounded by beautiful people can be thought of as freeloaders in this aesthetic commons. They reap the psychic rewards of being surrounded in that way. Now, maybe they feel some sense of shaming by that, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the person who is working out hard, aside from the personal value, the person who's working out hard and taking care of themselves and of their body and is beautifying the aesthetic commons while everyone else is not, is essentially being treated as a sucker, which is, not to say that they are a sucker for working out, because obviously there's this huge personal benefit to staying healthy and fit. But as far as our civic relationships with each other in the public space goes, I think there's an argument to be made for the public good to increase the experience of other people just walking around. And we see this concept actually at work in the world of homeowners associations, HOAs. There are all kinds of ordinances that cities and HOAs establish prohibiting excessively ugly yards. You're not allowed to keep dumpers, cars you use to cannibalize parts from, or just, piles of pallets, or what Matthew Crawford calls yard gold, things that you can recycle. And they don't allow you to do that because it's ugly. So the principle of an aesthetic commons is understood and established and just known. But I think it applies to people too. So from a less selfish and less personal perspective, contributing to the aesthetic commons is a reason A, to work out, but also B, to post physique, because seeing pictures of beautiful people is a positive experience. End of story. And so in addition to the accountability and the ethos demonstration that comes with posting pictures of fitness content, staying in shape, and healthy bodies, there's an aesthetic component. It is almost like art, so long as your body is something you think of as a canvas to be worked on and refined, as an artist might refine their work. So those are the arguments for. There's the ethos values argument, and there's the aesthetic commons argument for posting physique. But what about the negative arguments? What about the concern about vanity? And what about the concern about shaming? The vanity argument is very superficially compelling, because it basically guilts other people for taking excessive pride in themselves. And everyone knows that there is a real danger in being too proud. There is a real danger of being too proud. And to the partial credit of the vanity argument, there are people who just post physique to show off, who post it purely to maybe attract the attention of the opposite sex. This is, funnily enough, the untruth of that for the most part is why many people on the left have taken to calling post physique a homoerotic phenomenon, which is entirely untrue. It's kind of a desperate reach, but it's sort of an acknowledgement that these guys are mostly going for the attention of other guys. They get that part right, at least. But that is, there may be some danger in pushing the pride button a little bit too much, especially in a social media environment that is sort of famous for doing that. But I think the counter argument to that, it's superficial to people who aren't participating in that. I think it sounds very persuasive, and it's very easy for someone who's sitting on the sideline to look at the people who are participating in this post-physique culture and to say, oh, those guys are just really proud. Those guys are just vain. But once you start doing it, and once you start hanging out with other people who post physique, that argument falls apart so quickly, because you almost experience the opposite kind of body dysmorphia. Because what you quickly notice is that the other people posting physique are way prettier than you. You come across people like, I don't know, Jack Donovan, or the Liver King, or Hafthor Björnsson, or any number of these other strongmen and powerlifters and gymnasts and bodybuilders who have done such extraordinary things with their body that you will never be able to do for genetic reasons, and also time reasons, and also diet reasons. But they are impossible ideals to chase. And the idea that it is a demonstration of vanity to post pictures of yourself on social media, largely to other people who are also posting pictures of themselves working out, and are much more fit than you, because those are the people that you're following for inspiration. It's, if anything, on the inside, if you're in that culture, it is a massive check on vanity. It is a massive check on the idea that my ability to do 15 pull-ups is in any way impressive. You see people deadlift, 600, 700, 800 pounds. I actually got to see a friend of mine from high school deadlift 800 pounds. He was throwing 300-pound sandbags over a bar the height of my chest. Absolutely mind-shatteringly strong. I will never be that strong. I don't have the build for it. I don't have the muscular skeletal structure to do that. But I can get closer to it. I can get a little bit closer to it. The idea that people who are in this culture and posting pictures of themselves are just being vain is only superficially plausible if you don't know what it's like to be in that world. But what about the shaming side? What about the people outside the culture? What about the world that you are shaming for not for not being as fit as you? What about their feelings? And here, it's a touchy point, because the post-physique world can be a little schizophrenic on this point. On the one hand, they will sometimes say overtly that they are pro-shaming and desire to shame people, and especially to shame each other into working out harder. And yet at the same time, those same people will see pictures, videos of weak guys at the gym trying, and they'll be benching the bar, or they'll be deadlifting one plate, they'll be deadlifting 135, and they will be the biggest supporters and cheerers of that. They as a rule don't shame at all the people who are weak but trying. The people who they want to shame are the people who don't try at all. And that can look inconsistent, I suppose, from the outside, but it has to do with the shared values. The weakling at the gym, or the person who can't run a mile, so you see him out there walking, they're every day they're walking to try to get there. They see that as effort, and so that's an element of the conversation with shaming, but it doesn't get around the shaming of the people who aren't at the gym, and maybe they bring other things to the table. The shaming is an interesting one because it's sort of countered by the ethos point. The people who are concerned about being shamed by gym bros are the sorts of people who will pass around that meme on social media saying, every muscle represents a language you didn't learn, a book you didn't read, an interesting fact you didn't take the time to discover, or whatever. Never mind all of the incredible amount of knowledge and anatomy and physiology and nutrition that goes into learning about your body. Never mind that some of these strength trainers are polyglots and are sort of philosophers in their own right. It's sort of a cope that to imagine that bodybuilders are just a bunch of meatheads. BioLane and people like him notwithstanding. It's the whole point of post-physique is we don't care about the opinion of people who don't share our values, just as the people who are attempting to both shame people for posting physique and also accuse the post-physiquers of shaming don't share the values of the guys who are trying to get stronger. where there is no shared values, there's no conversation. So it's just, it becomes just concern trolling, which is where you are pretending to offer constructive critique while really just tearing something down. There's no reason to care about the people who are concerned about being shamed by, post-physique, because those people who will just as soon tear down the gym bros. They just share different values. So overall, I guess to conclude that, not to get redundantly redundant here, I think post-physique is a really valuable tool. It's not the be-all end-all for internet existence. Obviously, there are shortcomings, which I hope I dwelt on enough for people to acknowledge and hopefully work around. But the two arguments for the ethos position and the aesthetics common that you are building into provide actual collective civic value for this phenomenon. It isn't just personal. Although there are obvious personal benefits to being stronger and healthier. And I think the arguments, the most common arguments against, the arguments about vanity and the argument about shaming, really don't hold up philosophically or experientially in the world. So I think that's all for this episode. We'll come back and talk more next week. Thanks so much for listening.